Well, Essendon will be playing the Fremantle Dockers on Thursday night football to open round 15. The Bombers are going to want to put in an improved performance after the shellacking they got from Geelong, and we're going to talk all about the upcoming match in this video. So I think we all remember pretty fondly the last time these two teams played. We beat Fremantle by 1 point at the MCG, an unusual venue for an Essendon Fremantle game, but that was late last season, and it was a long point by, I think it might have been Sam Durham, where it was a beautiful little tap out of the centre, which went to Merrett, who was able to get it to Durham, and Durham slammed it through for, I guess what you'd have to say is a pretty important point, and we were able to win the game by that solitary point. And that was a pretty memorable game in what was petering out to be a forgettable season for Essendon last year. And you would hope that there would be a case to at least bounce back, if not for a win, but at least in terms of just getting some pride back. And it's not unheard of, and it's certainly not unexpected when a team has had a big loss for them to bounce back. You do hear the phrase, a week is a long time in football, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it also is very, very true. So just looking at the two teams, last time we played, there were a lot of changes to what the team is going to be this week. Now, it's hard to predict what the team is going to be this week, although, as I'll bring up in a moment, there will be an 11th debutant, and I'll get into that in 1 second. But it is difficult to predict because we're coming off a 5-day break, so we don't know if they're going to be players just rested because it's a 5-day break, and we're going to have players come in just on to bring in some fresh legs. We're not quite sure. But the players who played in the match last year in round 20 who didn't play last week and probably won't play this week, Langford, Harrison-Jones, Menzies, Stringer, Durham, Nick Bryan, Cox, Redmond, Mackay, Jake Kelly, Draper, Davey and Shield. So there was 13 players who played in the match that we won by a point last year that either won't play this week or may not play this week. Shield might, possibly, right? He's in the running. But all the others are players who played and will not play, or are highly unlikely to, either are not at the club or are just in the reserves, like someone like a Davey and probably, or Menzies, and it's unlikely that they will play. So it's as much as 13 changes from the team. So this is not uncommon either. Most weeks that we're looking at, Essendon are having around 10 different players who played in the last match between the two teams when I do each preview thread, and it's half a team difference. So it really is a huge difference. One thing we do know is that Vigo Visentini will be playing in this match. It's been confirmed by the club website and on Twitter. He will be playing. This is not a surprise. He was held out of the reserves team on the weekend in preparation for this. Now, I think they've been planning this for a couple of weeks just because it was a 5-day break and they didn't want maybe Todd Goldstein playing off a 5-day break going to Perth as well. Like the double whammy. It's not just a 5-day break, but a 5-day break and a road trip. So it kind of makes sense that Todd was going to play against Geelong and he was going to get rested in this match. It's not confirmed he's rested. Maybe they'll go with 2 ruckmen, but I think at this stage it's pretty obvious he's going to get rested. And Vigo is going to be brought in to go against the big twin talls of Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson. So that's going to be a baptism of fire for him. But obviously we've got Peter Wright down there who will help him out. And Blackiston as well, if he stays in the team. Maybe he was not quite ready last week, but he actually is a ruckman. Was picked as a ruckman in the mid-season draft. So we do have some options down there that can help out against the powerful Fremantle combination, but Vigo will be making his debut. So the 11th debutant already this year for Essendon. You get the feeling we're getting to the point where there's not going to be much more. Right? You can only sort of run the well so dry, I guess. But Vigo will be officially playing this week. So what about Fremantle? What changes did they have to their team from last time we played them? Well, last time they played Essendon, they had the following players playing: Walker, O'Meara, Hayden Young and Sturt. And those players were effectively replaced last week by Werner, Shai Bolton, Matthew Johnson and Reid. Now, Switkowski did injure his hamstring, so he won't be playing. I would assume he will be an out from the team that defeated North Melbourne by 6 points. So there'll be at least one change to the Fremantle lineup. But as you can see, there was only really 4 changes from the time that they played us last year to playing us this week, and we're going to have as many as 13 different players playing. So it's a big difference, that's for sure. Would I keep Blackiston in the side? Yes, I would. I know he struggled a bit last week in his first game, but you got to remember he was picked as a ruckman in the draft. He hasn't played in the back line before, and he was trialled in the back line in the reserves because we basically need taller backmen, and he did well in the reserves with 11 intercept possessions. And he struggled against Geelong. Well, of course he's going to struggle against Geelong down there against, Shannon Neal and Cameron and all these sort of players down there. So I'd like to see him get another chance, just because if Essendon have invested a little bit of time in the backline with him, then that investment needs to be for a couple of weeks to see how it goes. You can't just bring someone in and then drop them. So I'd like to see them persist with that for another week or another couple of weeks. If at some point it's obvious that it's not working, okay, then pull the pin on it. But I'd definitely like to see him stay on in the backline for another week. So what changes will there be to the Essendon lineup? Well, it's complicated this week because obviously the 5-day break, also the poor performance of so many players last week. You can't drop the whole team, obviously, even though we'd like to. That's just not the way it works. So obviously Goldstein out and Vigo Visentini in is the obvious one. And as for the other changes, I've got Loal coming out. I just don't think he's quite ready yet. He did okay in his first game, struggled a bit last week. I just think he probably could do with a few more matches in the reserves. And I got Perkins getting dropped. He hasn't been dropped this year, but he was sort of half dropped last week. But coming on as the sub, if you count that as kind of like half dropped, and his form is just scratchy. He does frustrate me, Perkins, because it looks like he's a good athlete, but his football brain doesn't know where to run. The more I see him, the more I kind of think he's probably not going to make it, at least to the level that we anticipated that he would be, being a top 10 pick and everything. But I think he's coming out. And the two I've got coming in are Shiel and Sartis. This might divide opinion. Let me know in the comments, guys. Look, it's all about opinion. At the end, there's no right or wrong, but at the end of the day, you could say, well, why would you bring Shiel in? He's 30 or over 30, and he's probably going to get delisted at the end of the year. But I just think we're too young at the moment, and we do need an extra, leadership head in there to help out Merrett around the middle. There's just too many inexperienced players, and there's room to have another older player in there. It's just you just can't have too many young players, otherwise you end up just having matches like that happened last week where you just get exposed. So I just think that extra bit of class, and he does have a bit of class about him, and I think just with his age profile, it's probably a smart thing to bring him in this week. That's what I would do. Sartis, I think as well, should come in. I'm not confident that he will. For some reason he just seems to be on the outer with Brad Scott. Maybe there's some players that just don't do it for some coaches for whatever reason, and he's finding it hard to break into the team. And I found it amazing last week that Sartis wasn't even a sub. Not a sub, it wasn't even an emergency. So, but he keeps on putting in good performances in the reserves. That's just a fact. Is he a perfect player? No. Are there things he needs to work on with his kicking? Of course. But, he can still get the ball, and he's still got some qualities. So I'd like to see him at least, get a game and at least see how he goes, because you can't really, judge someone unless you play them in the seniors for not this 55% match time either. Actually play him for, a full game in the middle of the ground. Sartis was playing some matches earlier in the year, and he would play like 55-60% game time. And I'd really like to see him sort of get that, play a full game, and then we can judge him as a senior player, because it's very difficult to judge him and say, well, he hasn't got what it takes. But how do you know when he's not playing? How do you know? I mean, and even when he did play early in the year, he wasn't playing, the time amount that you would associate with a normal midfielder. A normal midfielder would normally play 80 to 85% game time, even a little bit more than that. So I'd like to see Sartis, Shiel, and Vigo in for Loal, Perkins, and Goldstein. I mean, look, you could make you could take a million changes to the team. But I think that's probably the way I would go. Let me know what you guys would think in the comments. So one thing I definitely want to see is an improved performance in system. And those things are some of the hardest things to get right because they require a lot of planning. And you'd think that all clubs, Essendon included, would put a lot of work into this sort of stuff. But watching us have, 200 handballs last week, but watching us have more possessions than Geelong, yet lose by 100 points, pretty much says everything about how we play. All right, I mean, how can you have more possessions than a team and lose by 100 points? It's kind of insane, isn't it? And it shows you how good the good teams use the ball, how efficient they are with the ball. And we just need to be more efficient with the ball. I mean, too many handballs, too many dinky little handballs. We put ourselves under pressure, and we really need to move the ball quicker, but also do so smarter. Geelong have always got that one play just ahead of and behind the ball in case there's a turnover. They've got an extra play behind the ball to, defend. There's an extra player in front of the ball if they get the ball to attack. And we need to stop the overuse of handball. I think get back to about a 2-to-1 ratio of kicks to handballs. And I think part of the reason is that the players, when they get the ball, they just panic and say, I don't want it, I'll give it to you. And then they don't want it, and they'll give it to somebody else. And at the end of the day, you've racked up 5 or 6 possessions, but you've really, not only have you gone nowhere, but you've found yourself under more pressure. If you're at least going to be a kicking team like Geelong are, and we're more of a handballing team, I mean, there's a couple of advantages. For starters, if you kick the ball and you can find a teammate, well, you get basically a free kick every time you can mark the ball, right? Which is Aussie Rules 101. We're not, telling everyone anything they don't already know. But it sort of stands to reason that when you over-handball the ball, you're obviously putting yourself under pressure because you can be immediately tackled, which is obviously not the case when you go for the kick. Just looking at the handball differential, we are number 1 in the competition. We are plus 27 in terms of compared to what our opponents have, which is first in the competition by a mile. Fremantle are 4th in that particular stat. Interestingly, Fremantle have this season been the slowest team in the AFL at moving the ball. But whilst they are the slowest team at moving the ball, they are the most direct team once they do move the ball. So they do take their time. They do give you a bit of a chance. They will give our defence a little bit of a chance to set up. But at the end of the day, they do move it quite slowly. And whether this will be compatible with Essendon's game style, I don't know. But I'd rather be playing against a team that moves it slowly rather than moves it quickly. I can tell you that right now. So that might be something that could play into our hands. But as I said, they do happen to go quite direct once they actually do kick the ball. They are a very direct kicking team. They actually don't go backwards that much. They don't chip it around that much. They go slow, yes, but they go slow and long. They're also pretty adept at scoring off turnover, which is something I've been on about on this channel. It's the biggest score source in the AFL. If you can score off turnover, you will most likely be a good team. In terms of score from turnover differential, right, then Essendon is minus 17.8 points per game, and Fremantle is plus 4. So they are about 3.5 goals better per match than we are in terms of scoring off turnover differential. So what do I think the result is going to be in this game? Are Essendon a chance? Well, of course we're a chance. I mean, you're some sort of chance. Certainly there's always that bounce back factor when you have a bad loss. I don't think we're going to win this game though. Fremantle are about a 4-goal favourite, according to the bookmakers. About 26 points actually is the sort of expected margin in the game. And they've kind of turned their season around a little bit. They're currently sitting in the 8. They've won 8 games, lost 5, and they're starting to establish themselves as, a pretty formidable team. It wasn't a great performance last week by them, admittedly, against North Melbourne. They only fell over the line by 1 goal. And let's face it, if that game was played in Melbourne, where it should have been played, remember that was a North Melbourne home game, then Fremantle are coming off a loss in this match. So their form is a little bit scratchy, but it's good enough to see them 8 wins, 5 losses. They've got a percentage of over 100, 106 actually. We've got a percentage of 78, which pretty much tells you everything about the two teams. So Fremantle, this is a match from their point of view that they would need to win. They're sitting right on the cusp of the 8. They're playing Essendon in Perth. They would be looking at that thinking, we just need to win this game. That's how they would be looking at this game. So it'd be good to be able to cause an upset. I think an upset is a possibility, but I think the most likely result is a Fremantle win, and that's what I'm predicting. I'm going to say Fremantle by 30 points exactly is my prediction. Fremantle by 30 points. What do you guys think in the comments? Let me know. Is there anything you think I've missed? Anything you disagree with in terms of team selection? I know everybody will all have their own views on that, as it always is. I hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Like and subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost anything to do so. It will ensure you never miss a video. Have a great day, everybody. And as always, go Bombers.